Do you spend hours in your head thinking about something that happened, could have happened, or might happen? Do you ask others what to do so you don't make a mistake? Welcome to the Playing It Safe podcast. I am Dr. Z, your host. I am a clinical psychologist, an author, and a person that is super passionate about sharing with you science-based skills to overcome any type of fear-based struggles. Who doesn't experience fear? Who doesn't play it safe? In this show, we will discuss how fear-based reactions happen in day-to-day life, how playing it safe behaviors look like, sound like, and feel like, how you can put into action solid tips from behavioral science to get unstuck from worries, fears, obsessions, and anxieties, and how you can start doing what works, what matters, and what you care about. Behavioral science doesn't have to be boring. Thanks for listening, and let's get started. Drop your standards. Let go of your perfectionistic tendencies. If I were paid $1 every single time I hear this message, I will have a large bank account by now. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Z. When you are pursuing a top performance, from athletic to intellectual to artistic ones, it is fundamental that you distinguish those common principles that improve your performance and your well-being altogether. In this episode, Brad Stulberg and I discuss research-based skills to deal with high-achieving and striving behaviors in a skillful manner and without losing yourself. You will learn skills to distinguish when perfectionistic actions are working for you or against you, the difference between values-based goals versus ego-driven goals, how to avoid burnout in the information era, how to manage your proneness to perfectionistic actions, tips to handle the fear of failure, and how to figure out what is in the other side of your fears. Before we jump onto the episode, I want to invite you to reflect on how often do you get stuck in your head? How often do you notice a gap between the life you want to live and the life you are living? The truth is that you aren't alone. When dealing with doubts, worries, anxieties, or fears, it's quite likely that you spend a lot of time in your head, thinking and relying on all types of thinking strategies to manage those anxious thoughts. If you are ready to get out of your head and break free from those thinking strategies that stand between you and the life you want to live, please go to my website, www.thisisdrz.com, and download a 21-page guide that will help you to back on track. If you are like many other people, you may wonder, how does one actually go back on track? Here's my response. You check your values and how you have been living them. When was the last time that you pause and ask yourself, am I doing what matters? Am I living my values in my relationships, career, friendships, and spiritual life? The reality is that most of us live life letting life happen to us. And if we are lucky, we figure out what's truly important to us and what we want to stand for. So another way to check how we are really living is by pausing, checking what truly matters to us and whether our actions are congruent with those values or not. This 21-page template includes a description of different life areas, a values thesaurus, a values dashboard, and a reflective prompt for each area in your life. So again, the website is www.thisisdrz.com, and you can find there this values-based review so you can start living the life you want to live. And without further ado, let's jump onto the conversation with Brad Stulberg. So one of the things we know is that the average person will spend approximately 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. So that means we spend a lot of time getting things done and hustling and jumping from meeting to meeting in some cases. And no wonder that in the information era, being productive, being efficient is the theme. We all are trying to maximize and optimize our times, our meetings, our schedules. And at the same time, there is a lot of these fears of dropping the ball, making mistakes, and dealing with anxiety about not getting things done. So I am curious, in your experience, Brad, how do you see this process of hustling and getting things done? What has worked for you so you can get things done without losing yourself? And what tips you will have for the audience?
Yeah, so I think that optimization works until it becomes the very thing that gets in your way. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is that there is something to say for instilling in yourself good habits and keeping a schedule and trying to be quite productive and deeply focused when you want to make progress on meaningful projects, whether this is at work or outside of work. However, I think that sometimes we end up trying too hard. And when this happens, we go from a state of openness and joy and freedom to a state of anxiety, restlessness, and distress. So I like to think of optimization as a double-edged sword. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing that I'll say is in terms of how to operationalize this, I have two things. The first is that I encourage all of my clients to set really firm boundaries and then to stick to those boundaries. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier to tell yourself, hey, I'm going to be really focused and just crush my productivity habits for these 4 hours, maybe between 9 and 10, between 1 and 2, between 3 and 4. And set that time aside on the calendar. Don't have any distractions. And that's the time where you can really try to get the most out of your brain. But then there are
Mm-hmm.
other times for catching up on email, for mind wandering. And of course, there's
Mm-hmm.
time when you're not at work, when you're at home, when you're engaging in joyful activities that have nothing to do with your profession. And all of this makes whoever you are a complete human being. And I firmly believe that the more complete we are as human beings, the better we'll perform. We know that the pathway to growth is taking on stress, productive challenge, stimulation, followed by rest and recovery. So if you're just
Mm-hmm.
optimizing all the time, even if all you cared about was your performance, you wouldn't even be performing that well. The second thing that I think is really important is to help people understand that progress on big and meaningful projects takes a lot of time. And the best way to get a great result is to be okay with being good enough over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you try to be perfect, you're going to burn out. It's an unrealistic bar. And what'll happen is you'll be perfect for a month and then you'll burn out. And then you'll be perfect for another 3 weeks and then you'll feel emotional fatigue. Then you'll be perfect again. And it's this cycle of starting and stopping, where if we can just lower the bar to being good enough, it allows us to be so much more consistent. And over time, that consistency compounds, and good enough repeated for years tends to end in something great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is a lot to unpack in what you say. So you mentioned that one of the tips to manage all the things that we need to do and remain fresh, engaged, and revitalized is to set boundaries and to also set goals that are realistic, not necessarily perfectionistic. Now, the challenge I see in the work I do with my clients is that many times people are afraid of disappointing others. It's really hard to set boundaries with the relationships you care the most. You're concerned about disappointing your friends or not being a good enough parent or not being a good enough worker. So if people are dealing with that fear, but you see that they are overextending themselves and they are overbooking themselves, and you're encouraging to set some boundaries, how would you help them to navigate this fear about disappointing others, this fear about missing things out or hurting the relationship?
So, the first thing that I would say is that we are going to disappoint others, and we have to accept that. Nobody is perfect. And
Yeah.
if we live our whole lives just trying to serve others, we'll still end up disappointing someone along the way. So it's not something that we should aspire towards. It's not something that we should take pride in, but it's just a fact of being an imperfect, flawed human that at times we're not going to live up to our own expectations or to others' expectations of us. I think where people get into a lot of problem here is they make all kinds of assumptions and they catastrophize and they tell themselves stories in their own mind about what others will think of them instead of just having upfront direct conversations with the people that matter to you, whether it's a partner, whether it's a child, whether it's a colleague. And those conversations can be quite authentic. It can say, hey, my fear is that I'm going to let you down or I'm going to disappoint you. Here's why I need this boundary, or here's why the current pace of work feels unsustainable, or here's why, honey, I need time alone on Saturday mornings to go to the gym, even though we have 2 or 3 young kids. What do you think about this, and how can we work together to make something that's not perfect for me, not perfect for you, but perfect for us? Or in the case of work, something that will allow us to move forward on work in a sustainable manner. There is a real trade-off when you downshift from nonstop optimization and productivity, where in the short term, you will get less done. If you're just hustling nonstop for 16 hours a day and living just to meet other people's needs and hit goals, and you go down to 10 hours a day or 9 hours a day of that, the work, you'll get less done. That's just laws of the universe. It's physics. However, over the course of a year or a decade or a lifetime, I argue that you'll get a lot more done and with a higher quality. So if you're used to burning the candle at both ends, there's going to be a little short-term sacrifice where you're not getting as much done, but the long-term benefit of sustainability, of consistency, of high quality tends to outweigh that. And I think that's true in a relationship too, right? I think if we can be good enough partners, that relationship has a better chance of having longevity because we can accept each other's flaws and imperfections and we can keep showing up. Whereas eventually, if we try to be perfect for everyone, whether it's a friendship, a colleague, a romantic partnership, or a child, we start to resent that person. And that resentment never leads to good things down the road.
As you were saying that, I was nodding my head and smiling because I think it's liberating when we radically accept the fact that, yes, we are going to disappoint people. Even when we love them the most, we are going to mess up. We're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I think it's really hard when we hold ourselves into these high standards, right? About being at the perfect version of ourselves. If I can ask a little bit more, you make the point about setting goals that are related to being good enough, not necessarily the perfect version of yourself. One of the things I witness with overachievers, overthinkers, type A personalities, Sagittarius, is that they are usually concerned about regret, or they are afraid of negative outcomes.
Yeah, well, I think that in terms of the feeling of regret, I would ask the person how what they're currently do is working for them. And if they feel like they're barely treading water and they're seeking therapy or coaching because of that feeling, then to me, that is the best evidence that continuing to go on the same path is probably not the best choice. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is let's consider this an experiment. So anytime I work with a client to make a behavior change, it's always an experiment. There's no thing that is permanent other than death and taxes, and certainly changing your routine, you can always change it back. And I think by considering these things and framing them as experiments, it takes a little bit of the pressure off for it to go really well the first time, and for a person to make a commitment, because it's just an experiment. It's just trying something new out. And then the other thing that I help people realize, and it takes a little bit of a leap of faith, but I do think that just having a really explicit understanding of this trade-off is so important, that when you shift out of this kind of mode, there may be things that you miss. There may be things that you regret. And there's so much that you gain in your fulfillment, your productivity over the long haul. You're not burning out. So a story from my own life is I coach a neurosurgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon. So very few people in the world can do what this person does at the skill that they do it. And one of the things that this person struggles with is burnout because they're just always on and they feel like they have to be always on. Young kids' lives hang in the balance. And it could be my young kid's life one day. So I don't want to tell him to stop working. We need pediatric neurosurgeons in our communities. But we talked about how if he continued to go at the pace that he's going, and he cut me off and he said, I would become depressed to the point where I would be at risk. My life would be at risk. And I said, well, that's a pretty high cost for yourself, for your family, and certainly for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at it the other way around. Let's say that you got your working habits in a place that you thought would be sustainable and would contribute to better mental and physical health. And we went through that.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said, though, is, well, what happens if I get that one call in the middle of the night? And instead of taking call 4 days a week, I only take call 2 days a week. And there's two things. One is problem solving, which is, well, another doctor will be on call. And you know what? That other doctor, even if they're not as good as you, they'll probably be 90% as good and it will probably work out okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we also face the really hard reality that there will be times when perhaps he chose not to take call and he is the perfect surgeon to do a procedure and it doesn't go well. And that might happen once or twice in his career. And that's just the occupational hazard of being this kind of doctor and caring so deeply. And some radical acceptance around that and some grief around that he's not God, he's not Superman, that he can't save every single child that needs brain surgery in his service area always. And that's going to be his life's work, is coming to terms with this. And again, the last thing I want is for him to check out. I want him to have a long career for himself and for everybody else that he's treating. And yet we have to face these trade-offs. Otherwise, we'll just keep thrashing about in the water until we burn out or work ourselves into depression.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that. I relate a lot to what you're saying because I know this in my personal life and also with my clients. When people who are prone to high achieving behaviors, excelling, striving, perfectionistic actions, they get hundreds of messages about dropping their standards, letting things go. And it's quite alienating for them, as it has been for me. Because when you deeply care about things, of course you want to get things right and perfectly. I think to me, it's a matter of discrimination when you pursue that, when you let it go. And learning to find the rhythm so you can keep doing what you care about according to your standards without losing yourself. Now, as you were sharing this example, the other variable that came to me is how sometimes we may experience this conflict between values-based goals and ego-driven goals. I need to be the best. How do you handle that? Because it can be very tricky, right? Especially when you deeply care about things, you may get lost in looking at your self-identity as a human being based on your accomplishments and just pursuing always being the best, which is a little bit different than pursuing values-based goals. How do you navigate through that?
Yeah, this is such a profound question because I think it is a real challenge, and especially in today's world where there are seemingly metrics for everything. It's so easy to find external validation and to get caught up in it. So the first thing that I've come to think about here is we are really creatures of our environment, and our environment shape us more than we often want to admit. So if you are in an environment that is all about external validation always, then you will likely start to value external validation. If you have all the apps on your phone and you're constantly checking your retweets and likes and followers and comments, if you refresh your dashboard at work to see how your performance is doing 5 times a day, if those things are within reach of, your hand, your fingertips all the time, well, then of course those things are going to exert a pretty large power over you. They have to. It's addicting, right? We are social creatures. We strive for that kind of validation in our lives. We evolved to need that and to want that. So the first thing that I say is, well, how can you design your environment in a way that is conducive to values-driven goals instead of ego-driven goals? That can mean taking social media off your phone. That can mean setting some boundaries around when you get reports at work so you're not constantly just in the metrics. That can
Mm-hmm.
also mean the people with whom you surround yourself. So, are you working for a goal with people that you enjoy spending time with, that push you, that you can also joke with and not take yourself too seriously? Or is everyone around you really focused on external measures and validation?
Mm-hmm.
So, really trying to get that environment right. The second thing that I think is really, really helpful here is accepting that at times you are going to be driven by ego goals, and that's okay, so long as it's not the majority of the time, and so long as it's not a huge majority. So, the way that I like to think about it with myself and my clients is that on most big projects, if I'm 60-40, 60% values driven, 40% ego driven, then that's probably okay. I feel best when I'm 90-10, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's 60-40, and that's okay. But once it starts to get 40-60 the other way around, that's when I need to pause and reevaluate my environment and make a shift in how I'm working, because then that gets unhealthy.
I love that metric. Distinguishing, right? And normalizing. So I think appreciating that sometimes, yes, you're going to do things driven by ego, and other times you will really spend much more time on doing values-based goals. But having the metric 60-40, 90-10, 80-20, I love it because it's very concrete and tangible. So that's very
Yeah.
helpful.
In asking yourself, what's the true driving force? I
Yeah.
remember once a conversation with my therapist where I said, do I just write because I like being popular? I like having people know my name. I like the retweets. And she said, well, is that the only reason you write? Is that why you started writing? And I said,
Mm.
no. And then she said, well, how do you feel when you're actually doing the work? When you're reading, when you're researching, when you're coming up with new ideas? I said, I feel great. I'm in flow. Time melts
Mm.
away. It's one of the few times in my day where I'm not overthinking when I'm writing. I'm just in the zone. And
Mm-hmm.
then she said, well, then who cares if when you publish a piece, it's partly ego driven? Like, it'd be one thing if you told me that you hate writing, you don't like reading, and you're only doing this for the validation that it brings. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case. Of course, it's going to come with validation. Your name is on a book. There are bestseller lists. Like, you're not a Zen monk. Of course, you're going to care about that. But if that's not why you're doing the thing, then just take that along for the ride and just
Mm-hmm.
accept it and give yourself some self compassion. And that was so helpful because now what I can ask myself sometimes is, am I doing this because I want to and I enjoy it? Or
Mm-hmm.
am I doing this for the validation? And if it's the latter, then I either need to change how I'm doing it or consider stop doing it altogether. If it's the former, then that's okay to get caught up in some of the ego stuff because it's not the driving force.
Yeah, yeah. There is so much to say about that tip. I think it's beautiful when we really reflect on what drives everything we do and we say, and we also make room to be our authentic selves. For that part of us, it could be ego driven, but we accept it as it is versus criticizing ourselves and punishing ourselves. And as you were saying, the other thought that was showing up in my mind is I think when you are doing something that's values based, it's very revitalizing, engaging. And sometimes when you're doing things because you are avoiding something, because there is this experiential avoidance of not being good enough, feeling unseen, the quality of the experience is different, right? Within acceptance and commitment therapy, we understand that experiential avoidance is driving a lot of psychological struggles. And this would be one example. I was writing because I am avoiding not being good enough, because I am avoiding the sense of being a failure, or am I doing because it's really driven by my value of contributing and I get a kick from doing it and it's revitalizing. So in your work, how do you see experiential avoidance showing up? How do you work with that?
So in my clients, the avoidance comes down to not trying as hard as they could because they're scared to fail.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
story that I love to use is if you think back to when you were in school, when you were in middle school, there were certain kids that never tried. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason that they didn't try is because they were the popular kids and they knew that if they tried, they might fail. So they just didn't try. And I think that we might not do it to that extreme as adults, but sometimes we do that and we don't give things our all because that fear of failure. And what ends up happening is we miss out on a lot of richness and texture in our lives. The
Mm-hmm.
second one that's even harder is we hold ourselves back from going all the way, from loving fully, from really investing all of ourselves in something, because deep down inside, we know that eventually it's going to change. So
Mm-hmm.
we love at an arm's length. We parent at an arm's length. We write our book at an arm's length
Yeah.
because we know that eventually our significant other is going to pass away, or our child's going to move out of the house, or our book might not be well received. So we don't want to feel that pain. So we withhold from having a full human experience.
Yeah. But if I were your client and I say, I am thinking about applying for a new job, but I'm not sure I am qualified for it. And let's say that I do have the technical qualifications and I meet the criteria to be a good candidate. But I am scared. I'm scared that if I go to this job interview, I'm going to make a fool of myself and it's going to be really tough if they reject me. So I'm like, I think I'm just going to pass. And let's say that that's my pattern. That the last 5 years, I see a potential job opportunity that I get excited, but then I start overthinking, and the outcome is that I don't apply for it. I don't submit my resume, I postpone it or avoid it. How would you respond to that? How would you work with that?
So the first thing that I would do is I would try to figure out what's on the other side of that fear.
Okay.
So I would ask you, if that job interview went really, really well, let's say that you did it and it went great and you were a good fit, what would you feel and how would that make you feel?
I will be in heaven, to be honest, because it would be really exciting to be part of a team with different trainings and different skills and different capacities.
Yeah, so your values live on the other side of that fear. And I would say that it's going to take a lot of self discipline and a lot of mental toughness to go do the interview knowing that you might fail. Because if you fail, you'll have gotten so close to this thing that you want really deeply. So then I would ask about self compassion. So, can you be kind to yourself if you fail? Because if you can't, then you're never going to do the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you fail, you'll just beat yourself up and you'll be scared of all that. But, Patricia, if you can say, I really want this job because I think it would fit my skills and I think I'd be in heaven, as you said. And it's going to be really hard to get because it's a great job and there are many qualified people applying. And I can't control who those other people are. I can't control whether or not the interview committee is in a good mood the day that I apply. But what I can control is that regardless of the outcome, I can be really kind to myself and I can be proud of myself for putting my skin in the game and giving it my all. And then me as a coach can be really proud of you. So I would say,
Mm-hmm.
forget about that. Make me as your coach proud. I'll take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. If you fail, we'll work it out together after. And then you just have to take a leap. But I think it's just normalizing, taking that fear with you. So many people think that if they feel fear, something's wrong and it's avoidant, where in reality, if you feel fear, that generally means that it's really important. And as I said, on the other side of that fear is something that you care deeply about.
Two sides of the coin, right? I love how you will handle that situation. Sometimes with my clients, I invite them to visualize the steps that I need to take to face that interview. Imagine you're walking into this office. What is your mind telling you? What's showing up in your body? Or what comes next? I think there is a lot of messages about visualizing the outcome that you're going to get a job, but the research is very clear. Actually, if you visualize the outcomes, you're setting yourself for a failure because we don't have control of that. But visualizing the steps can actually prepare us. And if you add this piece of self-compassion, Brad, how would that look? Will be like self-talk, will coach myself like, okay, Patricia, you're doing your best. How will you teach people to practice self-compassion in the moment?
So in the moment, I think the best thing is just a soft mantra to remind yourself that you're doing well and then to bring you back into the present moment. So I like to use, this is what's happening right now. I'm doing the best that I can. So
I
you're
love
on the way
it.
into that job interview and you're feeling 9 out of 10 anxiety. I don't tell someone to try to calm down or make the anxiety go away because that just never works.
That's
I
true.
say,
We know
hey,
that.
the anxiety's here, like it's coming along for the ride. But
That's
there's a difference between repressing it and trying to make it go away. And there's a difference between really engaging it and just
mm-hmm.
naming it and saying, wow, I'm feeling so anxious right now. Brad told me I might feel anxious. This is what's happening. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm going to take the anxiety along for the ride. Maybe it's an intrusive thought. I don't belong here. You're going to fail. You should just, go down the elevator and don't walk in, or send them a text and say someone got sick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to reason with that thought. That is just an intrusive thought. Name it and be like, man, I wish it weren't so. I wish I weren't having all these intrusive thoughts right now, but here we are. So I'm going to do the best that I can. And I think something as a fellow student of acceptance and commitment, I think the most powerful part of ACT is that it teaches you that you can learn to have thoughts and feelings, not repress them, but also not take them seriously and just let them be there. And then they lose all their power over you. I once had a therapist who was just absolutely wonderful, and she would talk about intrusive thoughts and intrusive feelings is like a 3 or 4-year-old on a long car ride. And they'd ask a million questions. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No, we're not. No, we're not. You don't want to get angry at them, because if you get angry at them, then they're going to start crying and it's harder. You don't want to tell them to stop asking, because then they're just going to ask more. But you simply just say, nope, we're not there yet. And then you get back to the road. And sometimes that kid's going to cry and throw a fit. And in those cases, there's 2 things you can do. One, you can try to calm the kid by being really compassionate. I know it's hard to be on a long car ride like this. I know that you wish that we were there. I wish it were so too, but we're not. We still got a little bit more driving to do. And then the kid might calm down, or the kid might start thrashing about and crying even more. And in that circumstance, what do? You just let the kid cry. You give the kid a safe space to cry. But like either way, that kid's coming along for the ride. And I think our intrusive thoughts and feelings are a lot like that kid.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I will very much appreciate it if you will subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And if you're feeling extra generous, I welcome a review on Apple Podcasts. Show notes of this episode are in the website playingitsafe.zone. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter so you can receive more tips to stop all types of unworkable playing it safe actions. See you soon!